Your job is basically to nag us into using condoms we never bought, he said, grinning across the conference table like a frat boy in a Brooks Brothers shirt. I had just spent 10 minutes walking through the company's exposure on cross-border data storage. EU servers, US mirrors, no consent protocols, violations stacked like unpaid parking tickets. And that's what he said. I didn't flinch. Just clicked the presentation closed, smiled, and said, "Well, I'm glad you're clear on the risk now." That got a chuckle from someone in HR, who later sent me a Slack that said, my hero," followed by a wine glass emoji. I should have taken that as a sign. Because in this company, Arsenotech, we didn't reward prevention. We rewarded pyrotechnics. If you sounded confident enough while the building burned, people gave you a raise for owning a fire extinguisher. Meanwhile, I was over here installing sprinklers no one wanted to look at. If this story already feels like something you've lived through or barely survived, do me a small favor. Hit that subscribe button and tap the like. 97% of people hear these stories but never subscribe, and it means the world to our little team when you do. Helps keep the truth loud and the drama flowing. Now, back to the clown show. I'd been compliance director for 5 years, which in startup years is basically a fossil with a laptop. I built the entire framework from scratch: data retention, vendor due diligence, privacy disclosures, the works. At one point, the CEO called me the reason we've never been sued. But then we hit Series C, got a little too hot for our own good, and hired a new COO to streamline leadership. Enter Jackson. Jackson was one of those guys who pronounced audit like a threat and governance like a joke. Every time I said legal exposure, he rolled his eyes so hard I thought his contact lenses might flee for safer ground. The first week he was here, I caught him joking in the kitchen that I was just here to make us look responsible to investors. Next week, I wasn't even invited to the leadership offsite. His assistant said the invite must have gotten lost. Lost like ethics in his onboarding packet. He called me Sunshine once in a meeting. I didn't react. I just flagged it in my running Word doc titled Executive Behavior Notable Incidents. That file lived on an encrypted drive, off-network, along with screenshots, memos, Slack receipts, call logs. Every time someone decided to circle back later on a privacy breach or ghosted legal review before launching a new client portal, it went in the vault. You don't survive in my role by winning arguments. You survive by keeping receipts, quietly, religiously. Still, and I didn't think they'd be dumb enough to fire me a week before Series D, but they did. Jackson called me into a 15-minute meeting at 5:45 p.m. on a Thursday, the kind of time slot reserved for bad dates and dental work. HR was there, of course, clipboard and canned phrases. "We've decided to go a different direction with compliance," he said, like he was canceling a Spotify subscription. "Interesting," I replied. "Is the direction illegal?" He smirked. "Your compliance director title was always just for show." And that was it. No severance, no transition, no thanks. Just a single cardboard box and a deactivated badge before I hit the parking lot. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I drove home in silence, pulled into my garage, and sat in the dark for a good 20 minutes with the engine running and my hands still gripping the wheel like I was waiting for a green light that never came. And I walked inside, opened my laptop, and began backing up my archive. Everything they ignored, everything they buried, everything I warned them about, especially that ticking time bomb about the GDPR breach no one wanted to touch. I didn't know exactly when I'd use it, but I knew I would. The first time I realized we were illegally mirroring EU user data onto US servers, I thought it was a misconfiguration. Some intern-level oversight. A line of code pointing the wrong direction. Easy fix. I sent a Slack to DevOps, polite but firm, asking them to confirm the environment. They ghosted me for 4 days, then casually replied, "Yeah, we've been doing that since the Madrid rollout." Jackson said it was fine. Jackson, of course. See, under GDPR, cross-border data transfers require something called adequate safeguards. You can't just shovel personal data from a French yoga app into a US data lake because it's convenient. There are rules, fines, teeth. You ignore that stuff, you're not just breaking a law, you're hanging a legal noose over your Series D. So I documented it. Sent a formal incident escalation to legal and infosec with the subject line, "Unapproved data transfers, EU user exposure." 2 days later, the general counsel called me into his office. Closed door, blinds drawn. The air smelled like budget coffee and fear. He leaned back, hands behind his head, and said, "Look, no one's gotten dinged on that yet. The EU's all bark and no bite unless you're Facebook. Don't worry about it." I stared at him like he just suggested I do shots off a subpoena. "That's not how compliance works," I said. He shrugged. "That's how fundraising works." And just like that, I understood. They weren't afraid of being wrong. They were afraid of delays. Investors don't like delays. Due diligence is a spotlight, and no one wants their ugly side showing when the checkbook opens. I left his office, walked straight to my desk, and filed a formal internal memo with full documentation, dates, screenshots, internal policy citations, the works. The timestamp read April 14th, 6 months ago to the day the Series D meeting was scheduled. I CC'd the necessary VPs, legal, even one of the founders. No one responded, so I started backing up. Not just that memo, everything, every ignored thread, every compliance review marked pending for longer than a week. Every Slack where Jackson or his buddies laughed off things like unregulated third-party access or vendor contract gaps. All of it, organized by category and risk level, backed up onto an off-network SSD I kept in a fireproof box under my sink, alongside my passport and my dad's army dog tags. Because here's the truth they don't want you to know. In startups, compliance is the designated scapegoat. If things go right, it's thanks to our bold leadership. If things go wrong, it's why didn't compliance catch this? You're not a team member, you're a human airbag, but I wasn't about to be anyone's cushion. I slept lighter after that, not better, just lighter. Dreams got weirder. I once dreamt Jackson was trying to convince a group of investors that GDPR was just a vibe, and they were all nodding while holding margaritas. I woke up laughing, then cried brushing my teeth. The board never asked about the memo. HR never followed up. And Jackson kept on crowing in town halls about how Arsenault was globally resilient and ready for hyperscale. He even used the word fortress once to describe our data pipeline. That same week, DevOps accidentally left a test environment open to the public internet for 72 hours, exposing thousands of API tokens. No alert went out. I only knew because someone from support sent me a DM saying, "Hey, should this be public?" I logged it, documented it, added it to the archive. That's when I realized I wasn't working in a company. I was working in a crime scene that hadn't happened yet, and they'd just cut the only person keeping the yellow tape up. The email subject line was Leadership Optimization Initiative Phase 2, which, in normal human language, meant heads are about to roll, and Jackson gets to play executioner. He gathered everyone into the all-hands Zoom with that smug, we're all in this together tone that consultants wear like cologne. Slide deck ready. Fake humility locked and loaded. The screen flicked through phrases like strategic recalibration, lean ops, and my personal favorite, ruthless prioritization. Ruthless, all right. Halfway through, he said, as we prepare for Series D, it's vital we double down on revenue-generating functions. Every role must have measurable impact. Then he smiled, like he was unveiling a new logo, not carving up people's livelihoods. 10 minutes later, I got the invite. 5 p.m., quick check-in. No agenda, just Jackson, HR, and that same dead smile he used when someone called out the wrong budget code. Let me cut to the chase, he said, folding his hands like he was about to offer me a loan. We've decided to sunset the compliance director role. The board agrees it's no longer aligned with growth priorities. I blinked. You're cutting compliance before a funding round? He chuckled, like I had just asked if cake was fattening. Her title was always just for show. And there it was. The fatal line, like 5 years of risk mitigation, late nights, and cleaning up after executive tantrums amounted to nothing more than decorative tinsel on a LinkedIn banner. HR jumped in, fumbling some garbage about restructuring and exciting new horizons, but I was done listening. My ears were ringing with rage, but my hands stayed steady. I signed what needed signing. No protest, no scene. The cleaner the exit, the more control I kept. Effective immediately, they said. I nodded, stood, and walked out with my single box, plants left behind, of course. Office plants don't survive decapitations, but before I left the building, I made one final detour. I used my still active credentials to lock down access to several shared folders, compliance logs, legal correspondence, data audit trails. Not deleted, just obscured. Hidden behind a legacy permissions structure, only I knew how to unwind. They'd assume it was a bug. They always did. Then I walked to my car under the flickering parking lot light, popped the trunk, and slid the box in next to a stack of old conference badges and my unopened Arsenal mug, the one they gave me for Employee Appreciation Week. Hilarious. At home, I poured a glass of bourbon I'd been saving for good news and drank it like bad medicine. My phone buzzed with ex-coworkers texting WTF and "Are you okay?" I answered none of them. I just opened the fireproof box, plugged in the SSD, and checked the files. All there, all clean, all mine. I wasn't sad. I was ready. Because here's what people like Jackson never understand. When you cut out the conscience of a company, it doesn't go silent. It goes archival. And when the call comes, and it always does, I'd be waiting. Due diligence started like it always does, slow, dense, and full of smirking spreadsheets dressed up as certainty. Jackson strutted into the process like a rooster in a mirror maze, convinced his buzzwords and recycled pitch decks were enough to charm $90 million out of people who read SEC filings for breakfast. The CTO, poor bastard, got tasked with filling out the compliance questionnaires. I say tasked like he wasn't begging Jackson to outsource it. Man still thought GDPR was a Discord server. But Jackson waved him off with the same lazy magic trick he always used. It's boilerplate. Just use last quarter's answers. And so, like a drunk copying his own homework, the CTO recycled slides, redacted footnotes, and resubmitted stale data. One of the privacy sections still referenced a vendor we dropped last year after a breach. I knew because I was the one who'd uncovered it, flagged it, documented it, and damn near got laughed out of the room for insisting we cut ties. But that memo was buried now, along with me. What they forgot, what Jackson forgot, was that compliance isn't just forms and legalese. It's a chain of custody. It's time-stamped, tracked, real, and investors, they notice, especially the smart ones. Enter Nora Chen, junior analyst at Alder Bay Capital, which led our Series C and was circling to Anchor D. Sharp, polite, relentless in the way only underpaid, overqualified 20-somethings can be when they still believe in merit. I met her 2 years ago at a data privacy conference in Seattle. She attended my session on risk modeling and stayed after to ask if off-site backups count as breach mitigation if the vendor is under third-party litigation. I knew then she was trouble in the best possible way. Now, she was the one reviewing our compliance packet. It didn't take her long to smell blood. 3 days into the review, she started flagging inconsistencies, mismatched risk register dates, missing quarterly audits, and the weird disappearance of all documentation around the April data mapping revisions. The answers from Arsinoa's side? Flimsy at best. We consolidated systems, said the CTO. It's being migrated, said Jackson. Must be an archiving delay, said legal. I could picture Nora blinking at her screen, one brow arched, mouse hovering over red flags like a sniper choosing targets. She didn't reach out at first, just let the pressure build. I was watching from the sidelines, of course, discreetly. No contact, just listening. Reading between the LinkedIn updates and late-night DMs from sympathetic ex-coworkers. Then a whisper came down the grapevine. Alder Bay's internal compliance lead had raised a question to the board liaison, something about cross-border data flows and unaccounted memos. That's when I knew. They were circling the April 14th file. I poured myself some tea that night, sat on my couch, and stared out the window while an old jazz record spun slow and cracked in the background. Not smug, not vindictive, just quiet, ready, like I'd left the last piece of a puzzle on the table 6 months ago and someone was finally reaching for it. Nora was digging, not because I told her to, because the truth was still there. Even if they tried to bury it under Jackson's performative PowerPoints and the CTO's cut-and-paste rituals. And when she finally reached out, it wouldn't be to say hi. It would be for a date, not dinner, not drinks. A documented date, the one that changes everything. The first tremor came disguised as a polite request. Nora's email to the Arsino compliance inbox was crisp, formal, and carved from the exact type of corporate granite that makes execs sweat without knowing why. Subject: Follow-up data transfer protocol documentation. Good afternoon. Can you please provide the complete compliance activity log covering the period from March through May of this year, particularly as it pertains to EU user data? No threats. No drama, just calm precision. But in a room full of smoke, that kind of question might as well be a fire alarm. Jackson's reply? Delayed, deflected. Rerouted through legal, then IT, then legal again. 3 days passed and all they offered back was, we're currently consolidating legacy archive records from our prior system migration. We'll follow up shortly. Translation: we're stalling and praying no one opens that file. Inside the office, I imagine the air got heavy. Slack threads buzzing. CTO sweating through his undershirt. Legal flipping through old emails trying to remember who was on what call when I warned them. That file, that memo, was like a landmine they'd paved over, hoping no one would ever ask about that part of the road. But Nora didn't stop. She emailed again, this time just 2 sentences. Can you confirm whether GDPR risk was escalated internally prior to product deployment in EMEA? Any documentation appreciated. The energy shifted. And then, finally, came a DM, private, quiet, straight to me. Nora Chen, 12:08 p.m. Hey, off record. Do you remember logging anything about GDPR last spring? Something about cross-border mirroring? My heart didn't skip. It locked into rhythm like a sniper zeroing in. I typed back April 14th. Check the internal memo system. Title: Urgent Data Architecture Violation, EU Risk. No fluff, no backstory, just the date. Because the date did everything. It told her when I saw it. It told her I escalated it. And it told her the company had 6 full months to fix it and didn't. That single reply cut through 6 layers of executive bullshit like a surgical blade. I didn't need to say anything else. Nora was sharp enough to know what that date meant. 6 months of silence after a flagged risk that exposed user data across borders. 6 months where that memo should have been logged, updated, shared with counsel, and disclosed to investors. Instead, they buried it, pretended I didn't exist. And now, right on the eve of their $90M victory lap, someone with a magnifying glass had found the crack in the foundation. I set my phone down, exhaled through my nose, and walked to the kitchen. Made toast. No fanfare, just the quiet crunch of something breaking somewhere else. Because that's the thing about paper trails, they don't burn easy. And the second someone reads the right one, everything starts to smoke. Nora found it, of course she did. Tucked in the back corner of the internal compliance archive, right where Jackson's consolidation had conveniently failed to purge, sat a clean, timestamped PDF labeled, Urgent Data Architecture Violation, EU Risk Dated, April 14, authored by, redacted CC. Legal, CTO, coup. VP product inside. A point-by-point breakdown of how Arsenal Tech was duplicating sensitive EU user data into US. Hosted infrastructure, without consent, without safeguards, and in direct violation of GDPR Article 44. Estimated fine, $11.6 million based on data volume and jurisdictional overlap. Proposed mitigation steps, ignored. Response from legal, will review next quarter. Response from Jackson, this is what slows companies down. Nora cross-referenced the memo against the compliance packet Jackson and the CTO had submitted to Alder Bay just 2 weeks ago. The word GDPR didn't even appear once in the section about international data handling. Not once. Then she pulled the activity logs from after April. That's when the full rot set in. Instead of fixing the issue, they expanded the rollout. More user segments mirrored. More endpoints lit up. The mirroring process was even bundled into a new International Analytics Accelerator package that Jackson had pitched in a webinar with sponsors watching. Like holding up stolen jewelry on live TV and calling it innovation. The icing on the disaster cake? Internal JIRA tickets that showed DevOps raising the same concern again in June, only to be told, in writing, to ship now, patch later. It wasn't just negligence anymore. It was willful. Nora didn't write a report. Not yet. She knew how these games worked. One wrong move and they'd spin it as miscommunication, legacy systems, or incomplete discovery. So she did what smart people do when they see a match hovering near gasoline. She told her boss, the lead VC on the deal, a man who'd been nodding along with Jackson's fundraising pitch for weeks, who'd already promised his own LPs a category-defining winner, and who'd started whispering to journalists about a transformational partnership. Nora walked into his office, handed him a printed copy of the April 14th memo, and said nothing. He read it in silence, then flipped to the second page, paused, flipped again. His jaw tightened just slightly, but it was enough. The kind of expression that says, I've been played, and now I'm calculating the cost. He leaned back in his chair, hands on the armrests. No cursing, no questions, just a long, hollow exhale. Then he said, who else has seen this? Nora replied, it was formally escalated. 6 recipients, all internal. None disclosed it. That's when the pause got dangerous. The kind of pause that makes clocks tick louder. She didn't press. Just left the memo on his desk and walked out like a surgeon after making the first cut. That evening, Jackson posted a smug update on LinkedIn. Honored to lead Arsenault into its next phase of hypergrowth. Transparency and speed are our competitive edge. I saw it. I laughed so hard I nearly dropped my drink. Because somewhere across town, the man writing that post had no idea a red flag was already flapping violently over his deal, and someone far more powerful than him had just flipped to page 3. The Series D call opened with the kind of empty chest thumping you'd expect from a man who thinks charisma and compliance are interchangeable. Jackson showed up late by 3 minutes. Fashionably, he probably thought, grinning like a man who'd just convinced himself his own lies were a brand strategy. Hope everyone brought champagne, he said as his camera flickered on. We're about to lock in the future of global analytics. The board laughed politely. A few VCs nodded like they were already mentally converting equity percentages to yachts. Then came the kicker. And yes, Jackson smirked before anyone asks, we're fully compliant with everything, or so I'm told. A wink, like data privacy was a cocktail party anecdote. The VC lead didn't laugh, didn't nod, didn't move, he just stared. Camera on, mic off, silent. Which, if you've been in enough boardroom bloodbaths, you know that's not indifference. That's the sound of someone waiting to kill a deal with a single sentence. But first, they want to watch you perform. Slide decks were shared. Jackson droned on about customer lifetime value and international capture efficiency. The CTO stumbled through a few jargon-laced compliance buzzwords, most of which I suspect he Googled 10 minutes prior. Meanwhile, in the quiet back channel of reality, my phone buzzed. Nora Chen, 3:21 p.m. You're sure this was escalated? No preamble, no warm-up, just precision. I smiled, not smug, not vengeful, just focused like a match sliding against the side of the box. I opened my archive, pulled up the file, and took the screenshot. Subject line, Urgent Data Architecture Violation, EU Risk Date, April 14 Time, 9:52 a.m. Recipients, Legal, CTO, coup. VP Product Read Receipts, white heavy checkmark, white heavy checkmark, white heavy checkmark, white heavy checkmark. One of them even replied with a thumbs up. Another said noted. Let's sync next week. I cropped it tight, clean, direct, then sent it to Nora. No caption, no explanation. I didn't need one. Across the Zoom call, Jackson was still peacocking, talking about hyperscaling responsibly while his eyes gleamed with future headlines. I took a sip of water, calm, steady. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't shake because this wasn't revenge, it was release. The truth doesn't shout, it hums like a fuse sizzling toward the detonation point. Nora didn't reply, she didn't need to. Somewhere off camera, she was handing the phone to the lead VC. Somewhere inside that call, the balance was shifting, quietly, invisibly, like pressure building in a sealed room. Jackson didn't see it, couldn't feel it, but I did because I'd built the damn pressure gauge. It happened about 42 minutes into the call. Jackson was midway through some overwrought metaphor about data being the bloodstream of modern business when the VC lead finally moved. He'd been a statue the whole time, no questions, no smiles, just the kind of cold, surgical stillness that made everyone else talk faster to fill the silence. His camera had been on, his eyes fixed, but now he leaned slightly forward, just enough to read something on his phone. A pause, a blink. Then he looked up. Kill the wire. That's all he said. No throat clearing, no drama, just those 3 words. The room, virtual though it was, fell dead quiet. One of the partner reps actually looked up from their phone for the first time. The CTO went pale in real time, like someone had just drained his blood via Bluetooth. Jackson laughed. I'm sorry, is that a joke? If this is about the audit trail, we're already consolidating systems. There were some delays, sure, but the VC cut him off, voice flat. You withheld documented regulatory risk. His tone didn't change, but the way everyone else reacted made it clear. This was not a conversation anymore. That's fraud, he added. The memo was written in April. You disclosed none of it. Jackson tried to backpedal, his voice wobbling somewhere between confident and cornered. Look, it wasn't intentional. You submitted signed due diligence packets. Under oath. It was a misunderstanding. The VC leaned back. It's a liability. And a liability that size doesn't get funded. Not here, not now, not ever. He turned off his camera. That was the final bullet. The rest of the call dissolved into static, Jackson sputtering about updated logs, legal trying to hop in with clarifications, the CTO whispering something about patches already in progress. It didn't matter. The money was gone. The deal was dead. That wire they'd been prepping for weeks canceled. You could feel it in the collective silence, in the way none of the other investors jumped in to help. No one defended him. No one said a word. I sat alone in my kitchen, laptop open, watching the digital dominoes fall with the same quiet grace I'd used to place them. Not gloating, not cheering, just validated. The truth, once exiled, had walked back in like it owned the room. And Jackson, the man who called my job a formality, now sat exposed, sinking into the very risk he told everyone didn't exist. The fallout came faster than anyone expected. Within 24 hours of the call, Alder Bay officially pulled out. The wire transfer was halted. Their legal team issued a cold, factual statement, and the words due to misrepresented risk disclosures were plastered across every email chain like crime scene tape. The tech blogs picked it up by nightfall. Arsenault Tech Series D deal dies on compliance concerns. Red flag or just red tape? Lead VC says too big to ignore. By morning, the Whisper network had done its job. At least 4 other firms quietly removed Arsenault from their shortlists. A known fund manager tweeted, if your COO thinks GDPR is optional, maybe rethink who's steering your rocket ship. It got 12K likes. Then came the emergency board meeting. They didn't announce it publicly, but one of the assistants leaked it in a private Slack channel that still had me listed, leftover access from when I used to review NDA flows. Old habits die hard. Jackson was invited to pursue new opportunities. The phrasing was corporate elegance for get the hell out before we make this worse. The CTO stayed for now. Legal was restructured. And HR? They'd stopped updating their LinkedIn pages altogether. Around noon that day, I got the email from the CEO. Subject, reconnecting body. Hey, hope you're doing well. I know things have been bumpy. Currently rebuilding parts of our compliance framework and would love to consult with you on a project-by-project basis, if you're open to it. No apology, no ownership, just nerves dressed up in fake warmth and bullet points. I didn't reply, not because I was bitter. I wasn't. I had already moved on, emotionally and professionally. But some bridges aren't worth walking back across, especially when the river beneath them is full of bodies who once called you sunshine. Instead, I unplugged the SSD from my fireproof box, labeled it complete, and filed it in the bottom drawer of my desk. Then I made coffee, French press, strong, sat by the window and let the breeze roll in like nothing had happened. Because the truth is, I didn't win by yelling or posting or retaliating. I won by waiting, watching, documenting. And when it mattered most, I let one line speak louder than every meeting they excluded me from. My title may have been for show, but the date, that was real. Appreciate you sticking around, you legends of the break room. Subscribe for more chaos. Let's make your old managers spill their coffee in fear.